natural to your audience. And while we're all aware of the power of social channels today, it's not always easy to keep track of the rate at which they develop, to harness their true power and drive results. To discuss how we can better utilize the power of social media, please join me in welcoming to the stage the CEO of Depop, Maria Raga, and the founder of the Golden Diamonds, Doina Ciobanu, in conversation with Scarlett Conlon from Vogue.
Thank you for the intro. Maria and Doina, so lovely to speak to you about this subject. So we all know social media plays such a large and important role in fashion and fashion brands, but I'm really interested to find out how it works for your brands, which are sort of differing scales of the fashion industry. So I wonder if we could start with, when did you both realize how important social media was? Maybe, Doina, if we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. First of all, to me, I think my story was quite different because I got on social media because I was living in a very small, one of the poorest countries in Europe, Moldova, with no fashion industry. And to me, social media back then was the only way to really communicate with the outside world.
Yeah.
Frankly, I was only about 15, 16, so I had no idea I could build a brand out of it.
Yeah.
And you only really realize the importance of social media when you live in a country with travel restrictions, with propaganda, and you realize that that's really the only way you can be a part of that world community. And that was kind of my reason for getting digital
communication.
Yeah. And only when I moved to London about 2 or 3 years ago, I realized that I can actually create a brand out of it.
Amazing. A very successful brand out of it as well.
Still working.
Maria, how does it work for Depop? Because obviously that is a social media platform as well as being a marketplace.
So Depop is a social marketplace in itself. It was born social. And so it already has that sense of community where users engage with each other, they share their stories. It's very much part of the Depop DNA. And this is very powerful because traditional advertising cannot generate that sort of word of mouth and sense of community that social media does. And so yeah, it's part of Depop DNA from the very beginning.
Yeah. And obviously, with social media, you're running it. So for a brand like yours, Doina, what control does it give you over a brand that a traditional brand without the use of social media would have had?
I think it gives you full control, really, because it's the only way you can speak to an audience without going through the traditional kind of news circulation or PR. And it really lets you tell the audience what you want to tell them and the way you need to say it. Media sometimes, traditional media, sometimes can get a distorted message. I've had, for instance, people write about me that I've done fashion design studies or my father is a politician, and neither of those are true. So when you communicate directly, it's much more different.
Yeah. And how does that work for a brand like Depop?
So for us, it's less so about the control. In fact, if we wanted to have full control of our brand, we'd probably not use social media.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible to control sometimes, right? For us, it's more about taking advantage of the fact that you can communicate with your users instantly in a very human way.
Yeah.
So we compensate with the lack of full control with that possibility to really share your values with your community.
And what do you find for Depop are the most successful platforms? And what do you use? Do you use, I mean, Instagram?
Yeah, so we use pretty much all the different platforms. It really depends what you're trying to achieve. So if you want to get big brand awareness, you probably go to Instagram or YouTube. If you want just to communicate with your users, you just use Twitter. If you want to get paid registrations, you use Facebook. So it really depends what you're after.
Where do you see the most users coming into Depop?
So for Depop, it's very much YouTube and Instagram is very powerful. In terms of the trends that we see recently, motion image is becoming really, really strong. So Instagram stories, Snapchat are becoming incredibly useful for us.
How do you think that encourages your users to then make a purchase, for example, if they come through those channels?
In terms, we don't use social media directly to drive purchases. We use social media to create brand awareness of Depop and bring them into our platform, and then let the product
speak for itself.
exactly. Because otherwise it becomes very insincere and too straightforward, right? So for us, it's about generating sort of brand awareness through Instagram or YouTube or the platforms, and then run our own campaigns within our own platform to just incentivize activity.
Yeah, sure. And Doina, what about you? What do you find as a social influencer and with the Golden Diamonds? What's the most successful social media platform for you? And has it changed as well?
Yeah, I think the thing is to always know where the audience is.
Yeah.
So when I was starting, there were blogs and those lookbook for fashion influencers. And that was very good, and I was there, and it was great. But then there was the need to kind of transition to the next platform where all those users from lookbook were going. And at the time, that was Instagram.
Yeah.
And luckily enough, Instagram has stayed for all these years. However, there's always a need for change. And for instance, a while ago, I was very much into Snapchat, and I wasn't the only one. According to 2016 statistics, actually, teenagers spend much more time on Snapchat than they do on Instagram compared to 2015. So then once Instagram introduced stories, it really compensated for that, and that's when Instagram really became the perfect platform.
Yeah.
I think there was a while when Instagram was just so overly polished and perfect that we all had this surreal expectations of life, because a lot of people don't realize how much effort goes into the production and how not everything you see is actually real life. It's just a magazine. So the stories gave the follower an option to actually get into the unfiltered life of an influencer, which I think is much more valuable, and it creates a better connection.
It's interesting how that has changed, even just in such a short period of time. Have you found a better response then from your followers when they maybe see you without makeup in the morning, or when there isn't a myriad of filters over your image?
Yeah, I actually don't see as much direct reaction, but I do see it when I don't do videos, and then people start writing, "Where are you? Why are you not on Snapchat? What's happening? Is everything all right?"
Yeah.
And then I realize that people actually enjoy seeing those videos.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about influencers, the rise of the social influencer has just gone stratospheric through social media and various other platforms. What do you think the strengths are of a social influencer? Maybe if we come to you, Doina.
I think social influencers, and their biggest strength is really the direct connection with the follower. I think, compared to traditional media where there's a lot of people involved in the process, and you can get kind of lost in so many people's personalities, when you follow an influencer, you follow them for their voice. So it kind of becomes like a personal connection, and people can actually relate themselves or their lives to you. And also for someone like me, it's great because I can directly reply to my follower, and that way I create a friendly connection with them. And I think that's irreplaceable, and I think that's exactly where, when it comes to working with brands, influencers can have a much bigger impact than the traditional media.
And then where does paid for promotions and paid for Instagram posts or paid for Facebook posts come into that? How do you navigate that? What is sometimes slightly tricky ground?
Yeah, well, for me, I think what I have to say is that I'm a person of principles and values.
Yeah.
So I literally say no to about 80% of job offers that I get.
Really?
To me, it's very important that the brand actually reflects my identity and my image. You see, I think that you're following your audience is a privilege, and I think we all need to keep on working in order to maintain and please that audience. So when I work with a brand that doesn't represent me, they can feel that. So it's kind of betraying your audience and betraying yourself. And that is why whenever a brand comes to me and wants to work with me, I first of all ask myself the question, would I buy, wear, or use this product? If the answer is yes, I work with the brand. If it's no, I don't. So that's why a lot of times I actually end up working with the brands that I wear or use in my posts anyways.
And it's a natural affinity.
It's a very natural,
Yeah. And in a different way, obviously, Depop has to drive sales. What do you find, but in a different way to a social influencer, what platforms do you find are the most successful or to drive traffic and to drive users to Depop?
So yeah, Instagram and YouTube are the biggest ones for us.
Mentioned that, yeah.
I was just going to say that I think I'm going to hire her if I can afterwards, because I totally agree on what you're saying in terms of influencers can be extremely, extremely powerful, but they have to be used very, very well.
Yeah.
And there are two things that are, I believe, highly recommended when you're using influencers. One is genuinity, which is very much in line with Doina was saying about the fact that that the influencer needs to be using the product because they believe in it, they like it, right? Not just because they've been paid for. And also the continuity. If you see an influencer using a product just once, and the influencer is not really involved in the brand, in the marketing efforts, in the events, that doesn't really stick to the audience, and it feels like a bit insincere. So genuinity and continuity, I think, is critical.
So can you tell us a little bit about the Depop customer and what it is about the way that we live our lives these days with all of this social media influence that makes it a success? Kind of who's your target audience and how do they engage with you?
It's very much in line with the fact that Depop was mobile first and social first. So logically, our audience tends to be very, very social, and they tend to be younger. So around 80% of our audience is below 35 years old. So very, very young, very keen to change their clothes or the style every 6 months, who knows. Like to be inspired and love to follow bloggers or influencers that they aspire to be. And because it's so social, it allows you to really connect with people that are similar to you. So all of a sudden you see multiple communities around sneakers or jewelry or beauty products because the platform fosters that interaction.
Because one of the huge success stories of Depop is really that people don't just come to buy, they then hang around and socialize and meet with other like-minded people, and they start to have a conversation.
Exactly. It's not just a place where you would go and sell your unwanted clothes. It's a place where you want to discover trends and get inspired and just get to know people that have similar interests to yours.
If we think about big brands, obviously huge fashion houses are employing various different means of social media. I'm interested to know who you think does it really well.
Surprisingly, I think Italian brands actually do it very well. And I didn't know that until a few months ago. But then I actually discovered that they're much more open than a lot of American or British brands. They actually hire so many social media influencers to be their models, to be their ambassadors. They even have started doing different video clips with them, music soundtracks for their campaigns, or just working on social campaigns for their blogs or Instagram. And I think that a lot of brands don't realize is that for millennials, it's actually unacceptable to still be snobby and have a superiority attitude because we're a different generation. There's so many brands and there is so many stores where we can buy things. And as a customer, if you see that kind of attitude, you just turn your back and go buy somewhere else. So I think even those brands are going to kind of switch to the other side in the next few years.
And it really is, I mean, on a lot of the different stages at the Web Summit, this Generation Z and the millennials, I mean, they're the buzzwords, really. They're who you're trying to connect to and attach to, so it's obviously important that they do. I was wondering, do you think there's a difference between influencing and inspiring? Maria?
Sure. So yeah, it's very similar, but also very different. Influencer is more about one way, with a direct action. I like something, I want to promote it, I want to influence somebody to buy something. Inspiring is much less direct, where there's more of a two-way, where it's very important that you understand, if you want to inspire someone, the emotions and the feelings of that person. So it becomes more of understanding the audience and making a more long-lasting effect on that person.
And how is influencing done successfully in bearing that in mind? How can influencing have soul and character, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very much in line with what we discussed earlier. Influencer can be super, super effective, but if it's not done properly, it can be perceived as
disingenuous.
Exactly.
Yeah. Doina, what do you think the difference between influencing and inspiring is?
I agree that they kind of sound similar, but I think they're also so different. I think you can influence people to, buy certain clothes, go to certain destinations, even design their house in a certain way. But I think inspiration lies well beyond that. And I think that not many influencers do, and I really want to do that, and I really want to inspire others to do, is to use their audiences in order to get involved in social global issues, which is, I don't know, from global warming to women's rights to education and anything really, and actually inspire people to make the world a better place and inspire their readers to achieve their dreams and go after the goals and just challenge them to actually live their lives. And I do think there is a huge space in the digital sphere for that, and I'm not sure why not many people are doing it yet, but I hope that's going to change.
Do you think that's something that we will begin to see more of with Generation Z coming up, and more bloggers, more influencers, more people using social media platforms?
To be honest, I don't know what to expect, because at the same time there's a lot of influencers coming in, a lot of users. Instagram in the past 10 months have grown like 100 million users, so there's obviously a big audience. But unfortunately, still a lot of people are looking at it more as a self-promotion or income. And I think I think it takes a bit more education into those issues, maybe interest. And I'm really hoping that we can all kind of unify and start looking into those issues, because I think influencers can really make a big change.
Yeah, definitely. And brands as well, when they use those means effectively. I wondered, Maria, if you could tell us what you think the future of social networking is from a brand perspective. How can brands harness it better, perhaps, or moving forward?
So, I mean, it's very hard to say what the future is going to be, right?
Sure.
But you start to see some trends around how apps are starting to integrate with one another. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Citymapper. That's Uber. Airbnb is also going to integrate with some OTAs. So I would expect something similar with social media platforms, where right now for us in Depop, you can instantly share your postings into Instagram really quickly, but it's not super integrated. So I'm anticipating to see some more flexibility around that and openness between different apps and sort of bundling together. At the same time, with the amount of information that social media has of the user, what you like, what you follow, what you comment on, I would expect a lot more customization of the content that you get, just because they know you, we know you.
Which has begun as well.
Exactly, as opposed to just a wide blanket that applies to audiences. So much more segmentation. And in terms of influencers, but I would be interested to hear from you. I start to see, there's loads of influencers with loads of followers. You start to see that they're starting to lose engagement, because obviously you cannot be following everybody, right? And so you start to see smaller YouTubers or people in Instagram that have less followers but a lot of engagement. So I anticipate to be using more influencers with smaller engagement rather than just one or two big ones.
That's really interesting. It's that element of like quality over quantity.
Exactly, quality versus quantity,
Well, I always say, when I work with a brand, I always try to explain that, there is no value in just big numbers. The value is in the right audience. And it really depends on the brand. You always need to look at the age, the gender, the geolocation of the audience. It's not enough to just have 1 million followers and promote a product that they just wouldn't care about at all. So I think in that sense, it's very good to know your audience, and at the same time to really post and deliver on what they expect from you. So my audience, for instance, is women aged between 25 and 34 and older women. So I know that they love fashion, they love luxury, they love consistency, and that is what I promote. I can't really wear clothes that a 14-year-old would, because that's just not what they want to see and not what they would buy.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so moving forward, more working together. I think outcome of that. Thank you very much for listening to us. I think we're out of time now. Thank you.
Thank you.